So welcome everyone to our Conservation Connector. And I'm Cynthia Canner, Executive Director with Prairie State Conservation Coalition, and really excited to have Brooke Thoreau here today. And she will be our speaker and talking about the Volunteer Stewardship Network and how that works and how they can support you and the opportunities that they have. And Brooke is the Partnership and Network Specialist with the Volunteer Stewardship Network and the Nature Conservancy in Illinois. So I will continue to keep an eye on people filtering in, but Brooke, why don't you take it away?
I'm Brooke Thoreau, and I work with the Nature Conservancy. I've been with TNC for almost 7 years, and I currently oversee the Volunteer Stewardship Network, which I'll be focusing on today. And I help lead a program called Thrive Outside Chicago, which is a new initiative that the Nature Conservancy is the backbone organization for. And it's specific to Chicago, the city of Chicago, and engaging organizations that are um, really breaking down barriers to the outdoors, especially for communities of color and other communities that have been underrepresented in conservation and outdoor programming. So today, the agenda for my presentation is I'll give a brief background on the VSN, or the Volunteer Stewardship Network, the opportunities it provides, but I'm really going to do a deep dive into the funding opportunities. We offer two small grant funding opportunities. One is the VSN Stewardship Fund. The other is the Community Convening Fund. And I'm going to do a deep dive into those because we're coming up on the next grant cycle. And I thought maybe a lot of groups on here who aren't aware of these opportunities might benefit from them. And so I wanted to give a deep dive into those to talk about what each one is and how they differ. First, I want to give a background on the Volunteer Stewardship Network. I know there's a couple of folks in this group that belong, their organizations belong to the VSN, but many of you might not be aware of where the VSN started and where we're at now. So the VSN was formed way back in 1983 by the Nature Conservancy and Illinois Nature Preserves Commission. And really, I'm sure you've heard of Stephen Packard. He was really instrumental in creating the Volunteer Stewardship Network. It was recognized, there were thousands of volunteers working on hundreds of sites in the Chicagoland area. And folks really wanted to learn from one another and to share best practices. And they saw the need for this creation of a network to bring people together. We are now a statewide program with the mission to support, promote, and expand the role of volunteers in restoring and caring for natural areas and other green spaces, as well as to support efforts that foster community connections to nature. So there are currently 160 or more groups that make up the VSN. I think when it originally started in the 80s, there were just a few groups, and then by 2011 or 12, there were 35. And when I started overseeing the network in 2017, there were 110 groups. So you can see in just the past couple of years how much the VSN has grown. And it's made up of public agencies such as forest preserve districts, conservation districts, park districts, private organizations like land and conservation trusts, grassroots and community-based organizations, so small stewardship groups that are tending smaller natural areas, community gardens, affinity groups. We've also recently begun to reach faith-based organizations that are overseeing and caring for green spaces in cities and rural areas, and educational institutions such as schools, particularly some of the groups that have joined the VSN recently are schools that have community gardens. And so you can see that these organizations are quite diverse, yet they all share something in common, which is that volunteers play a vital role in helping to carry out their missions in the protection and care of green space, natural areas, forest preserves, and so forth. As diverse as the groups that belong to the Volunteer Stewardship Network are, so are the ways that volunteers help. For example, these are just like 8 different ways that volunteers participate in restoration and care of green space and water, wetlands and water as well. Many groups engage volunteers in all of these ways or many of these ways, and some focus on very specific activities to engage their volunteers, but they include cleanup and litter removal on beaches, in natural areas and other protected spaces and neighborhoods. Seed collection and dispersal, that's really popular one. People love to collect seeds and to disperse seeds. It's a fun activity that entire families can engage in. Of course, there's trail maintenance, brush cleaning, clearing, rather, in neighborhoods, planting native species or planting food. Invasive species removal, which we all know is a very important part of the restoration process. And citizen science is also really important. And that's another way that volunteers can engage with groups kind of on their own time. And then, of course, we've recently begun to engage community gardens in the network. And so, of course, there's garden maintenance. And those are just a small sampling of ways that volunteers help organizations such as yours. And most of you are probably very familiar with the importance of volunteers in the work that we do. Well, now I'll talk about the ways that the VSN supports its members. So again, there's more than 160 groups across the state that belong to the VSN. And so these are the different ways that we support your organizations. And if you're not part of the VSN, but want to be part of the VSN, feel free to reach out to me afterwards, and it's really easy to join. I just take your contact information, your group name, and add you to my mailing lists. And then you'll receive our gatherings newsletter, which is currently on hiatus, but we are hoping to get it back. And I'm working with the Nature Conservancy's marketing team to create a new template, a much simpler, easier to read template. So we're hoping to launch that again this summer. But the email newsletter is basically a way for us to inform the network of different resources, upcoming events, funding opportunities outside of what the VSN offers, workshops that are available throughout the state, and news from across the state. We also like to highlight VSN members, volunteers, or special projects that are happening. So stay tuned for that. Again, we want to relaunch that this summer. We also engage our members through our Network for Nature convenings. And prior to COVID-19, it was largely in-person regional meetings throughout the state. But since we've also started to add virtual workshops and gatherings, and we found that it's actually doing things virtually is more equitable because more people can join. But we've also heard from members that that you all missed the regional in-person meetings, so we're jumpstarting that again. Starting in June of this year, in 2024, we'll be engaging Southern Illinois groups on June 11th. And so if you're based in the southern part of the state and you want to participate, feel free to reach out. And we're currently planning that meeting, and I'll get you more information as soon as it's ready. We'll also be doing a Central Illinois meeting in fall. So again, feel free to reach out if you would like to participate. And then later in later in the year or early 2025, we'll host a Network for Nature meeting in Northern Illinois. And the purpose of these meetings are really to bring groups together, to share best practices, to network, to learn new skills. It's just a great way for groups to come together once a year. And a lot of times these groups wouldn't normally have the opportunity to spend time with one another. So we find that it's really important to bring those groups together. That we also created the VSN Stewardship Fund back in 2018. And basically it's a way to provide volunteers, stipend staff, early career professionals, and other volunteer leaders in free training and educational opportunities. And currently, the VSN has a partnership with the Morton Arboretum, who many of you may know has a wonderful learning for all ages program. And they offer all kinds of courses such as the Chicago Wilderness prescribed burn training, courses on invasive species, plant and tree ID. There's gardening courses for groups that are engaging volunteers in community gardening. So there's a wide array of courses that the Morton Arboretum provides, and we're able to offer those courses for free through foundations that fund the VSN specifically for those opportunities. We've currently provided thousands, I think probably 2,500 to 3,000 scholarships to hundreds of volunteers across the state to participate in those courses through the Morton Arboretum. We've also hosted or sponsored wilderness first aid trainings in different parts of the state, and we hope to continue to do that in 2024 and 25. So if there, we try to make it so that several groups are coming together in one particular region. And so if you or your partner organizations that you work with are interested in having some of your volunteers be wilderness first aid certified, reach out to me and we can try to make that happen for you. You all have probably heard of the Wild Things conference that's based in the Chicago area. Last year and the year before, we provided scholarships to individuals who wanted to participate in the conference, but paying the registration fee was a factor that would prevent them from attending. So we provided scholarships, registration scholarships, as well as transportation scholarships for folks so that they could attend in person. Again, what I'll be talking more specifically about today are the grant and capacity building opportunities. So we have the VSN Stewardship Fund, which has been around, I think, since like early 2000s, 2003, 2004, perhaps. And then the Community Convening Fund, which we just launched in 2021. And I'll talk specifically about that. So this is another way that we not only connect volunteers to your organizations, but we support your organization and getting volunteers to you. This is our interactive map on the Nature Conservancy's webpage. And basically, it's folks put in their address and zip code, and volunteer opportunities in their area will pop up, which you can see on the map. It's showing the entire state, but it zooms in to the region that you input in the subject line. And in the right column are the list of organizations that provide those volunteer opportunities, and we provide links to your organization's website. So if you're interested in having your organization on the map so that when volunteers visit the Nature Conservancy in Illinois' webpage and are interested in learning about volunteer opportunities, uh, go ahead and reach out to me and we'll make sure that your group is on this map. We do get a lot of traffic on this webpage. Our marketing team tracks the traffic and what links folks click on the most and whatnot. And so we have found that it is definitely a useful tool for potential volunteers. I'm going to start with talking about the Community Convening Fund. Again, this was I had been interested in a long time in equity work and conservation. I went to graduate school and that was kind of my focus on my thesis. And then I was serving on the Nature Conservancy's Midwest Division Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Steering Committee. And I also saw that a lot of groups across the state were finding ways to kind of expand their audiences and membership and seeking out ways to be more inclusive in their programming. And so the Community Convening Fund was born really to support efforts that are support efforts of groups that are bringing sometimes historically underrepresented groups, connecting those groups to nature, or expanding programs that they've already started. And so the Community Convening Fund is basically, it's a seed grant or small grant opportunity to help VSN members do equity work. And I'll provide some specific examples of what groups have done so far in the past couple of years. But I'll give you a little bit more information about that. So ultimately, the purpose of the Community Convening Fund is to bring groups into the VSN, so to create a more equitable and diverse VSN, in addition to supporting organizations that are working to be more equitable and diverse. But bringing groups into the VSN that provide a different but essential benefit to human and non-human life. It's also to support community-based organizations that engage individuals living in the vicinity of green spaces such as community gardens and cities. It's to commit resources to groups that engage BIPOC, veterans, and people with disabilities in the programming of outdoor activities and the care and protection of green space. And it's to provide support to groups working to diversify their volunteer base in outdoor programming activities. Basically, again, it's a small grant opportunity. When we started in 2021, we had a total of, I think, $10,000 in our funding pool. And we awarded 10 groups across the state that were, again, seeking to diversify their volunteer base or their membership or their programming. And it's a cash grant that allows you to do this work. And so each year we've applied for funding from foundations to help support the Community Convening Fund program within the VSN, but also other programs within the VSN. And the Nature Conservancy has also kicked in funding to add to the funding pool. So we started out in 2021 with $10,000. This year, we're able to award $45,000 total. And so $45,000 will be committed to groups doing this equity work across the state. And Cynthia, maybe at the end of the presentation, you can talk just real briefly about how you're using the Community Convening Fund award for Prairie State Conservation Coalition.
Sure. Yep, be happy to.
Awesome, thanks. So this is again this is the third year. Applications will be due Friday, June 14th. We'll make award announcements in July of 2024. Again, this is a cash grant, so your organization will receive a check in August or September. We do require for this particular fund that groups either be 501c3 official nonprofits or have a fiscal sponsor that is. It's just TNC policy when we're granting out funding to organizations that they are a 501c3. We have found that for groups, smaller groups that don't have that status, other organizations have stepped up to be fiscal sponsors. So far it hasn't been an issue. This year, the maximum request will be $2,500. And because this is a cash award, TNC requires us to create grant agreements for you to sign, and your organization will submit a W-9. We try to keep the application process very simple. I mean, this grant and the VSN Stewardship Fund, which I'll talk about next, are small grants, and we recognize that sometimes the amount of time it takes to complete a grant application is sometimes not worth the funding, especially for these smaller grants. And so the same with reporting. We do have reports due at the end of the year, but we really just want to hear stories about how the grant benefited your organization, how you were able to connect people to nature, particularly communities that have been historically underrepresented in largely white-led conservation. And then if applicable, or if people are comfortable sharing photos. And it's really, we use reporting largely to seek funding to continue to build up the funding pools in the VSN. The Nature Conservancy does kick in a sizable amount of money each year for the VSN budget, but not recently, over the years, we've received outside funding for the VSN. So for an example, we recently received word that the Overweiler Foundation was funding the VSN starting now this spring in 2024, a 2-year grant for a total of $60,000. And so the reporting and hearing your stories and be able to sharing those stories with funders really helps to attract funders and to build up the VSN budget so that we can support your work. So I provided an example project and budget here, and I'll also go into a real life example, but I wanted to provide these examples to kind of give folks ideas of what the Community Convening Fund grant can be used for. And also what the budget looks like on the application. And so for this example, a group wanted to create a pollinator garden. They currently have a community garden space in Chicago, in a community where there's a food desert. And so growing food in the community is really important to the neighbors there. But they also recognize that creating a pollinator garden would be beneficial for not only growing their food and attracting pollinators, but also as an educational opportunity for youth. And so they wanted to hire a consultant to help plan a native garden, pollinator garden, and additionally they wanted to create training opportunities for their volunteers that were focused on native plant stewardship, so that once the pollinator plant or the pollinator garden was created, they would know how to care for the plants in the in the future. They also were requesting funding for transportation and registration costs. Typically, and many of you may have experienced this in your own work, that sometimes being a volunteer in a space can be a barrier if you don't have transportation or money to pay for transportation. And so the grant was helping to cover some of those transportation costs, and also registration costs for any trainings. And then they also wanted to host and publicize flyers and create local ads to advertise their community planting day that would also um, have music and food and programming activities to get youth and families excited about the garden. And so this is just one basic example of how the Community Convening Fund can be and has been used. But there's a variety of ways and so many examples of how groups have used the Community Convening Fund. And so what I want to do, we're in our third year now, going into our fourth. I'm seeking to hire another intern for the summer. And one of the projects that I would love for that intern to help me with is to create a document that summarizes all of the Community Convening Fund or Community Convening Fund projects over the past 3 years to share out with groups, give other groups ideas on how they might utilize the fund, and then to encourage groups to apply for the fund. A more specific example that I'll share, which I shared at the Prairie State Conservation Coalition annual meeting last month, was that 2 years ago, Grand Prairie Friends, which many of you may have heard of, it's a volunteer-driven, not-for-profit organization and land trust in East Central Illinois. Grand Prairie Friends used the funding from the convening grant to hire a Black-led consultation team called Reality Project. And Reality Project offers inclusive diversity and cultural humility training services. They also conducted an organizational audit of Grand Prairie Friends, of their practices and programming, of the makeup of their staff and board. And this was later complemented by an in-person workshop where the board, staff, and volunteers learned how to identify next steps into making their conservation work more exclusive. And Sarah Livesay, who is the executive director of Grand Prairie Friends, shared that the training that they hired Reality Project to do, and which was funded by the Community Convening Fund, brought a whole new level of awareness to their organization. And during that training and follow-up, they started identifying ways that they could be more inclusive. And they also learned how language impacts our relationships with communities that might be different than ours. And so this training process, along with their collaborating together to find ways to make their organization and their programs more inclusive, led to what is called a partnership with the Fallen Outdoors program, which is it's an organization, a nonprofit organizations that provides services to wounded warriors. So any combat veterans who have been wounded in a time of war and who are suffering from depression, homelessness, and other issues that were brought about by their time in war. The Fallen Outdoors program brings these veterans to areas where they can learn new skills or participate in adventure and outdoor activities. And so Grand Prairie Friends, as part of their Community Convening Fund, now has a partnership with Fallen Outdoors, and they allow bow hunting at their Warbler Ridge Conservation Area. And Sarah has shared that it's been a very, meaningful and important partnership that they feel really good about. They feel good that were able to through the reality project and through the training, they were able to identify ways to engage communities that they might not normally have thought about before that. And so we always encourage groups to to think about different ways that they could be more inclusive, and using the community convening fund as a way to kind of jumpstart that work. So I'll jump into the VSN Stewardship Fund, which is, as I mentioned before, has been around for many, many years. And basically it's a way to provide VSN members with the tools and supplies they need to engage volunteers in their natural areas and other green spaces. It also helps to fund newsletters and websites and educational materials. The difference with the VSN Stewardship Fund and the differences, I should say, between the VSN Stewardship Fund and the Community Convening Fund are, for one, the VSN Stewardship Fund is not a cash grant. We either purchase supplies for groups or they purchase them and submit reimbursements. But also the Community Convening Fund really is for bringing communities together or connecting communities to nature, whereas the VSN Stewardship Fund is providing more of those tangible items that you need when you engage volunteers in, let's say, protected area restoration and management. But both funds for the VSN are on the same cycle. Groups can apply for both funds. You don't have to choose between one fund or the other. And so, like the Community Convening Fund, this year the applications are due on Friday, June 14th. Again, we will share award announcements in July of 2024. The VSN Stewardship Fund, we've been steadily growing the pool. I think when I first started in 2017, we maybe had $25,000 in the funding pool for the Stewardship Fund. And now this year we're up to 52,000. The maximum award will be $2,000 in supplies and equipment and communications. And again, we require minimal reporting due a year from the time that you receive the grant. Again, groups have they can decide whether you want reimbursements, so you purchase the supplies and tools yourself, or we can place the orders for you, which sometimes makes it's good, especially for small groups who don't have a budget to purchase tools and supplies on their own. It just makes it easier if we do it for them. We have reimbursement forms and order forms that we send out with the award announcements, and so it makes it easy for folks to be able to communicate what their needs are. All right, and this is a non-exhaustive list of requests that we pulled from previous applications. But you can see there's a wide variety of things that people need, the groups need to engage their volunteers. Everything from, like, if you're using MailChimp to communicate with your members or volunteers, and you want the pro subscription, we can help out with that. Any sort of stewardship supplies, gloves, loppers, safety equipment, prescribed burning equipment. One group downstate even uses the Stewardship Fund to purchase their UTV insurance every year. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to pay for that. And so we encourage groups to be creative. Whatever it is that you need to keep your volunteers safe, to be able to perform your restoration work, and to engage with your volunteers and members is pretty much fair game. for the stewardship fund. It's a very simple application process. And I'll be sending out the application materials for both of these funds in the next couple of weeks as the deadline, as June approaches. We're already, almost mid-April. So I'll be sending out those materials very soon. And again, if you're not part of the VSN and you would like to be, please maybe drop your contact information in the chat, and we'll make sure that you're on the mailing list so that you'll receive not only the application materials for these two funding opportunities, but you'll also receive other opportunities of the VSN. For instance, I'll be sharing an announcement in the next couple of weeks also about the free courses that will be available for the spring session through the Morton Arboretum. Oh, and I forgot that I put together a sample budget for the stewardship fund as well. And I think that is all. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about either the funds, the VSN more generally, or if you have some project ideas that you want to share with regard to the Community Convening Fund. I'm all ears.
Great, Brooke, thank you so much. And actually, if you would like to stop sharing your screen, then we can all, and if you want to go on video, then we can see each other and have a conversation, because we've got a good 15 minutes left to do that. And I guess I'll just real quickly, as Brooke asked, share what the Prairie State Conservation Coalition is doing with their Community Convening Fund. So we're doing some community engagement, and thanks to our board member, Donna Doherty, who's on the call, who was already connected with a wonderful group called Alpha Kappa Alpha. It's an all women's Black professional sorority. It's global. There are chapters all over the state, and Donna and their president in St. Clair County, AKA Zena Cruz, we're connected now through Donna, and we're having a community engagement gathering in Belleville later this month. And we're going to be talking with other leaders from Alpha Kappa Alpha. And so that funding is going toward a dinner together and a sharing and a conversation about what nature means to us and how we can work together. Now, this is a group that has a mission to plant trees globally. And that's how they were already connected with Donna and some of the properties there with her organization. So we'll continue that as we travel farther south this summer in a Southern Regional Conference and support those other groups that we haven't been engaged with previously that are doing conservation work. And so we're building that network of people working together. So, and I think I'll probably apply for another grant. So I appreciate just that quick share. And then let's just throw it open to any questions. And you please come off mute. We're, less than 20 folks. And if you keep your questions short, then we can get to a lot of them, I think. So take it away. Who's first? Janice, you look so happy. Do you have a question? I love all your encouraging.
I have no questions. I'm just so grateful that there's this community, and also the VSN. I just learned about VSN last year, and it's a wonderful opportunity. So thank you, Brooke, for all that you're doing for us.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so unique because there's no membership fee. You just have to let Brooke know you want to work on this, and so many different opportunities for smaller all volunteer organizations to large. So take it away. Who would like to ask a question? You can come off mute if you have one.
Hey, Brooke, this is Joe. How you doing?
Hi.
So we've never put in for the stewardship grant, but my wheels are turning. We need to really get all of and of course we've got volunteer groups, very dedicated volunteers all over the state. We need to get them going on some good first aid training. We need to get a annual first aid training going. Has anybody else used the grant to do something like that? Or does anybody have any good recommendations? Like, who would I bring in to do first aid training? What association or group, is it Red Cross, Extension? Who does first aid trainings? And I'm not talking, they bring in the dummy and they show you how to, I've gone through it myself numerous times, but truthfully, if somebody dropped, I don't know if I could remember all the stuff you need to do. Anybody
Yeah.
got any recommendations?
Well, I don't necessarily have recommendations, although groups, I know Grand Prairie Friends helped coordinate an East Central Illinois Wilderness First Aid training group that the VSN helped to sponsor. And then we did that, we replicated that in Southern Illinois. So several VSN groups got together and the VSN helped to sponsor that.
Okay.
Things that I've heard is that the Wilderness First Aid training goes a little bit beyond the first aid because it deals with some outdoor trauma.
Well, yes, and that's why I was not, because we did that several years ago for a master naturalist class. And we actually, the guy that did the training, we did the training and then we took him on a hike and we had people spotted purposely with injuries. So we did sort of a disaster drill. But I'm not sure, and maybe that's what we need to, maybe we need to look at the first wilderness, because I mean, let's face it, anybody that's going to incur injury, or if you're going to have to work on somebody, it's going to be outside, right? All of us are, that's where all of our injuries could happen. So, okay, so maybe I've answered my own question. Maybe we just need to go back to the guy that did the wilderness, because come to think of it, he did bring the dummy in.
So we've got Joe, we've got some good response to that too in the chat, and that's the EMS, local Red Cross, Boy Scouts of America, contact your local police office.
Oh, okay.
And then there's some, so that's in the chat. And then there's another great question. Can folks apply for the Community Convening Fund and the Stewardship Fund in the same year?
Good question.
Yes, absolutely. You can apply for both funds. And I didn't mention this, but we do try to accommodate all groups. And so if we get more requests than we have in our funding pool, we, instead of turning people away, what we do is ask folks to reduce the amount of their request. So let's say, we say that the maximum request amount for the stewardship fund is $2,000. Well, we get so many requests that really, if we gave everyone $1,500, everyone could get a piece of the pie, right? So we do try to work with groups, and same thing with the Community Convening Fund. We try not to turn anybody away. Now, as the VSN is growing, we might have to start making some tough decisions, but we really hope to continue to be able to support everybody, and making it equitable by giving everyone around the same amounts. Now, if a group only needs $200 or $300 worth of supplies, that's one thing, but most groups are really going to apply for the maximum amount. And if we have enough funding, we'll give everyone the maximum amount, if that makes sense. But yes, please feel free to apply for both funds. They're both so different. One is keeping your volunteers safe and providing you with the tools and supplies you need. And then the other is really building those connections with diverse organizations and bringing folks together in nature. And I wanted to say one quick thing about the first aid, whether or not groups decide first aid training is best or wilderness first aid. Sorry, I knew this would happen. The mail carrier always comes at this time, and my dog has to bark. So anyway, reach out to me, because if we can get enough VSN groups together for any sort of trainings, the VSN can support, whether it's buying lunch for everyone, whether it's helping to pay the registration fees, or paying the trainer. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any training ideas, whether it's first aid or beyond that. We're constantly in the VSN looking for ways that we can support the work that you're doing. And sometimes, because we're not in the field, we don't necessarily know what you all need. With that said, I'll be creating another survey this year. I try to do it every 3 or 4 years, and it's kind of an extensive survey and it takes a little bit of time, but it really allows me to understand what your needs are, how the VSN can better support you. And so please stay tuned for that. I would really appreciate it if you would complete it, because it asks questions like, what trainings would benefit your volunteers and your organization? And then we can try to make those things happen. Like for years, we heard that like a native seed collection 101 would be helpful. And so I think it was 2 years ago, Kelly Schultz, native seed expert from Lake County Forest Preserves, did a VSN Network for Nature virtual training where she, did all the basics about seed collection. And it was so well received that I'm working with folks in the Nature Conservancy to put that training online, and so that folks can access it at any time. So just
And-
wanted to throw that survey out there.
Caleb, who's also with the Nature Conservancy, is putting some excellent points out in the chat, and the work that SIU does to host wilderness training. So
Awesome.
take a look at the chat as well. And does
Thank you, Caleb.
anybody have any other examples? Has anybody on this call used VSN funds in the past, either stewardship or community convening? Anybody here that wants to share a story, or is it everyone new to that?
This is Janice. We had an opportunity last year where we had a grant that we received through Lake County Stormwater Management, and the grant didn't allow for planting of live plants. And so we used the VSN to plant live plants to help support the grant. So it worked out really well because it brought the community together. We were able to install, live plants, and just really rounded the whole project out. So thank you, Brooke.
That's excellent.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We're glad to support all the great work you're doing. I think Gretchen, you were.
Yeah, I just came off of or put my video back on so I could say that we're hosting an event next month where we have a food forest that we're putting in Woodstock, Illinois. And as part of gearing up, we was on corn and soy before rotation before, but so now we're going to put in a milpa garden, and we have a speaker coming who is Gina Roxas from the Trickster Cultural Center, and she is going to lead our group in a demonstration of how we prepare the land and making sure that we get all of the seeds in, and I'm very, very excited. It's been really fun to work with Gina. And so we're doing that. And then we also actually got tools to use through the stewardship fund as well. So we did both, and we got both. So it was super awesome. Thank you so much.
And Gretchen is with the Land Conservancy of
Oh,
McHenry.
yeah, sorry. I should have
had people put in their affiliations. That's awesome. And that brings in the indigenous people's perspective on that. And that's community.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Any other examples or questions? I'll have a brief announcement before we close at 3, but we have a couple more minutes. Brooke.
I meant to mention this earlier, and I'm so glad Caleb is on the call. Caleb is based out in Southern Illinois, and at the Carbondale area. And he has been so kind to kind of step in, and because the VSN has grown so much and I'm really spread thin, I felt like I was neglecting the Southern Illinois folks. And so Caleb is going to help rebridge or reestablish those relationships with Southern Illinois VSN groups. He's also bringing in new groups. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Caleb. So you'll probably see his name more often now as he's more engaged with the VSN, and I'm just so excited to have him on the team.
And he's paddling now, as you can see from his photo. He's always paddling.
Yeah, I was like, thanks. I know we've had storms down here, so my internet's been lagging during this call, but No, like even some thoughts we've had, like there's so many different friends groups down here, friends of the Cash, friends of the Shawnee, friends of, IDNR. So we've even thought like the stewardship fund. We've had talks of, maybe everybody getting the same tools and then sharing on different work days and making those funds even go further. So just like kind of brainstorming thoughts even like that. Instead of everybody getting, a chainsaw, everybody getting the same chemical, we could share resources like that and alternate those work days and then a working calendar of a lot of these events too, as Brooke kind of mentioned. So hopefully we can do a lot. There is a lot of interest down here and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well,
Awesome.
I got a question. Brooke, in your last few seconds here, give us just a little bit more of an advertisement about the conference in June. Where is it at? And what's
Okay.
going on?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Network for Nature meetings that prior to COVID, we would host every year, one in Northern Illinois, one in Central Illinois, and one in Southern Illinois, to bring groups together to exchange best practices, learn new skills. And after COVID, we learned, people were kind of enjoying the virtual setting to stay safe, or not after COVID. We're never after COVID. But once COVID started chilling out a little bit, we were doing it virtually, but now I'm starting to hear again from BSN groups that those regional gatherings, in-person gatherings, are very much missed. And so Caleb and I are coordinating a gathering, in-person gathering in Southern Illinois for the Southern Illinois based groups on June 11th. For Central Illinois groups, I'm currently putting feeler. I'll probably do kind of like a doodle poll with all the Central Illinois groups to find out what time or what month and what times of day work best for folks, and plan on that in the fall outside of burn season. And then we will do one for Northern Illinois groups at the start of 2025, probably, if not before. So I'll be providing more details about that. So you're on my mailing list, Joe. So you would probably be more interested in the Central Illinois meeting.
No, we've got people all over the state, Brooke.
Okay, I will make sure then that you're included in that.
Do you know where it's going to be in Southern Illinois?
Caleb and I are currently, it's probably going to be in the Carbondale area. We're currently working at a specific venue. It's from 1 to 4:30 on July 11th. And we're working out the details.
Okay. All right. Well, if you need a spot in Central, keep us in mind.
Will do. Absolutely.
We'd love to host.
That's a great idea. Go ahead, Caleb.
I was saying, like, depending on how many folks, there's always like Giant City Lodge, that could be an option with food, or there's visitor centers there, or there's like local in town. So we have a lot of different options. We were just kind of waiting on head count and how many of the groups and kind of spatial location to decide. But yeah, around Carbondale would be just kind of an ideal spot if you have anyone that's would need to know a little bit ahead of time.
Well, Brooke, I want to say thank you again so much. It's 3 o'clock, so I'm going to conclude our program today. Again, this will be on our YouTube channel. And, honestly, it's such a wonderful opportunity for groups to find out about funding that is that you will receive. You're connected now, and we've got your email addresses when you sign up for this. I'm happy to share that directly with Brooke if that's okay, and then you'll receive that information. So again, thank you so much, Brooke. And just before you all sign off, we are going to have our next Conservation Connector in June, sometime in early June, and it'll be on herbicide drift and the problems with that issue and how it affects the lands that we are trying to conserve. So Kim Ernst-Pitcher with Prairie Rivers Network will be our speaker, and a date to be announced. So keep your eyes on that.